Hey everybody, Dr. Dan. This week we are talking about Chapter 3, so this is week 4 of the class, and for the most part, Chapter 3 is a continuation of Chapter 2 as far as getting us to time and place go. So by that I mean in Chapter 2 we were talking about the Europeans in North America, which is not the United States yet. And this week we're talking about these interactions between the colonists, so those are the people that are here, and Europe and Africa, sort of this Atlantic triangle of trade. So that's what we're talking about this week. And for the most part, history is about change, and I always talk about that. That if there wasn't any change, the history books would be pretty thin, and so the big changes taking place in this chapter, and this is important to know because it's an obvious quiz question. So the big three developments going on that sort of shape this chapter are really these escalating conflicts between the natives and the Europeans. So as you read through the chapter, you'll read about King Philip's War and these different wars between Native Americans and colonists. So that's one of the things that's really shaping what's going on, or one of the changes. And then another one is the expansion of slavery in the Americas. So in the 1650s to 1700s, the English learned that this model of slave plantations with free labor is very profitable. So that starts to grow. This notion of African slaves especially starts to grow in this time period. So that's another one of the three developments, okay? And then the third development is really changes in the relationship between the colonies and England. In other words, the colonies start to identify as the colonies, and probably more so as Americans now, not U.S. citizens, we're not there yet, but more so as colonists than Englishmen, if that makes sense. So those are the three factors. Again, these conflicts between Native Americans and the Europeans, the expansion of slavery, and the changes in the relationships between the colonists and the English. So if you get nothing else out of this chapter, when we talk about, hey, Dr. Dan, what happened in Chapter 3? These three things happened. Native Americans, problems there, this huge growth in slavery and the slave trade for profit, and then this idea that as the colonists make more money and become more successful, they tend to want to be more independent from England, and that's going to develop over the next couple of chapters. So that's where we're at in this chapter, and really sort of the things to know about here is that it's always what's going on in England is important. So in this case, the English, because they were going through some of their own turmoils with the Glorious Revolution in the mid-1600s, didn't really pay that much attention to the colonies in that period of time. But like anything else, when merchants and when slave owners and plantation owners started making a lot of money, well, then the mother country took notice and said, wait a minute, we got to make sure that we control these people and that we get a piece of the action. The book talks a little bit about mercantilism and this idea of enriching the mother country, and certainly that's at play in this chapter because North America, or the Americas I should say, but mainly North America and the Caribbean are turning incredible profits like nothing England has ever seen before. And you have all of these, landed gentry back in England, these gentlemen who've never really worked a day in their lives, and they've inherited this old money, and now all of a sudden they're seeing these guys that are running plantations in Jamaica, for example, get really wealthy really quick, and it doesn't really sit well with the old guard. So that's kind of going on behind the scenes, and as you read through, I think, honestly, one of the problems that I have with this chapter of American history is that, you can't reconcile it. If you're a person of color, if you're not a person of color, this is an ugly episode. And in some ways, we obviously see a continuation of it today. But this idea, and I talked about it last week, of superiority, this idea that, if you don't convert to Christianity, you're a heathen. And if you don't do these things, if you don't work for free, if you don't allow yourself to become enslaved, if you don't accept accept our Anglo-American standards of property ownership and cultures, then we will basically kill you. And I mean, that's sort of the English vibe that they come over with, and it's really hard to reconcile it, regardless. But it's an ugly chapter. We need to know what happened, and we need to know why these feelings are so endemic in our society, and part of it is because of these deep roots that we're reading about right now. So that's the best I can do. It's hard to reconcile this stuff. The other things to notice as you go through that, there are differences in the way that the Spanish treated Native Americans and the English treated Native Americans, and also understand that the French are in the mix. So there's a lot going on in North America right now, and these struggles between the English and the natives, and the English and the French, and the Spanish and the English. It's really a mess. So it's ripe for rebellion and controversy, I guess, if for lack of a better word. Understand the justifications for slavery. So the chapter gets into it a little bit, and we'll get into that more as we get later into American history prior to the Civil War. But early on, this idea that people from Africa aren't Christian, and therefore they're heathens, and therefore the Bible says they can be enslaved, is a justification that comes out again and again. So when you're asked this question on the quiz about how did the English justify slavery, certainly if you see an answer with the Bible, that's the one to pick, because that's what they did. So there's that part, and that's really about it. This week you have a brief quiz. Know those three developments that shape the chapter. Know that slavery was widespread in North America. It wasn't just part of the South. Know these elements of the Atlantic trading system, which involve three things, really. Shipping Africans to the Americas for labor is part of it. Exploiting slaves to grow crops and produce commodities, so that's another part of it. And then selling these commodities to Europe. So there's kind of this triangle of trade from Africa to North America back to England again. So these 3 points. And so that's a question on the quiz that you'll need to know. And then make sure you know what an Anglo-American is. If you didn't pick it up from my notes or from the reading, or you don't already know, find out, because you'll be asked about it on the quiz. So that's it for this week. If you have any questions, let me know. Be safe. Have a great day. Bye-bye.